Right. Good evening, everyone. I'm David Dawson. I'm director of the museum, and
Hi
Nicola.
everyone, I'm Nicola Trowell and I am the program manager for the Assizes for Devizes project that I've been working at the museum for 7 years now.
Time flies when you're having fun, doesn't it?
Like that.
I just found out I've been at the museum I think for 16 years,
Oh,
but there we go. Anyway, so what we're going to do is talk a bit about the Assizes for Devices project. We start off. I'm going to give just a bit of interest, well, what I hope will be interesting sort of historical background, which I don't think we've shared with many people before, and then we'll look through the plans where we are now. Then talk about the work that's going on to engage our audiences, what's called activity planning. And then we'll be able to hand over to you for questions. Okay, so that's the basic plan. So one thing that we found in the archive was we've been looking for ages, but we found in the archive this, which is the an account of the meeting Holden. I like that. Holden in the town hall this day, which is April the 9th, 1834, um, signed by 177 respectable inhabitants, forwarding the proposed plan of procuring one of the assizes to be held in Devizes instead of at Salisbury. So this is the beginning of the fundraising campaign to get the assize court built in Devizes, which was opened only a year later, which is absolutely amazing. And along with this is a list of the subscribers who contributed sums to the building of the assize court. So at the top, I can't read the name, but that's £500 that someone uh, committed to the building, and the whole thing cost £3,600 and something or other. So absolutely extraordinary to have this list. And some of the names are quite familiar to us today, including Hunt Grubb, and of course Robert Hunt Grubb, one of the trustees of the Assize Court Trust, has sort of stepped forward, and he provided half the funding to buy the Assize Court for the Assize Court Trust. So keeping going that family tradition. And what we realized is that this wonderful engraving, coloured engraving of the Assize Court, I'd always assumed it was done after the court was open, but in fact, we now realise that this was a fundraiser to get people enthused for before it was built to contribute cash to the building of the Assize Court. So it was designed by this chap, Thomas Henry Wyatt, who born in 1807, and you can see him there on the right, portrait by Landseer, sitting there with furrowed brow, working hard on his plans. So he was born into a family of architects and then set up on his own in 1832 under the patronage of the Herbert family in Wiltshire, who were really quite well off, to put it mildly. But the Assize Court was one of his very first buildings. But he made his reputation with the church in Wilton, that I'll show you at the moment. And altogether, he built or restored over 50 churches in Wiltshire. But then he worked on a whole range of projects right the way across the country. And he ended up as president of the Royal Institute of British Architects. So between 1870 and 1873. So very much at the top of his profession. But as I say, the Assize Court was one of his first. Now, this is the church at Wilton that many of you will be familiar with, an Italianate style, to put it mildly. I've not been inside. I must find out when it's open because it's full of these most amazing mosaics. And having been to Ravenna last year, somewhere I'd always wanted to go, that this is very much inspired by those Italian churches from the Carolingian period. But the other place he designed is this, which is the county hall at Brecon, and he did this after our assize court, but there's lots of similarities as well. So this is how I first saw it when before I'd met anyone there, looking quite sad. You can see the netting up to stop stone falling. It had been again deserted for many years, but owned by the council. but they were successful in obtaining funding from the National Lottery Heritage Fund to do the place up. And we went on an amazing hard hat tour around the building. And although it was in a bit of a state, it's absolutely nothing by comparison to how derelict our assize court is. But this is what it looks like now, all done up. It's absolutely fabulous with a really impressive gallery on the top floor telling the story of Brecon. And it's called Eger, and has a library out the back as well. So, a really amazing resource for the community. But of course, for those of us in Devizes, the other famous building is what you see here called the Wilts County Asylum, better known to us as Roundway Hospital, of course, more recently converted into flats and houses. Stunning building. And again, that sort of Italianate style. But the other thing that amused me was I was wandering around the British Museum and spotted the blue plaque you can see there, which is to Thomas Wyatt, 1807 to 1880. And so this is the house he lived in. So you can tell how important he was as an architect and how he became really at the top of his profession. So moving on in the history, we also were very fortunate to be given some photographs by a company. We've got the consulate here, which will remind me, called Carrow and Partners Architects of Wells. And they were commissioned by Wiltshire County Council in the 1960s to smarten the place up. And so this is a before photograph. As you can see, the assize court, this is the main assize court, Court 1, looking very sort of somber and utilitarian. And they were commissioned to liven it up a bit. And you see here the delightful plastic seating, bringing it bang up to date for the late 1960s. Also, we're very fortunate to be allowed to have digital copies that were of photographs taken by someone who attended the Open Day, which was held to mark if you like, the closure of the assize court in, I think it's 1983, if I remember rightly. So these are photos taken by the lady who came on the day. And something many of you will know is that we were able to launch an oral history project, culminated in publication of this pamphlet, this booklet called Voices from the Devizes Assize Court, put together by Padme Broomfield and Jane Shern, but also one of the Bath Spa students who worked on it is Helen Meikle, who has joined us now as project support officer, working with us to bring the assize court back to life, which is wonderful. It's great to see her back in a very different role. So I thought that would be quite interesting. Just go through some of the some of the background and the history. So where we are now is that the building is owned by the Devizes Assize Court Trust. We have basic agreement on the museum having a lease of the building on a peppercorn rent. The building itself is more or less stable. Doesn't leak too much. Yeah, stop laughing, Nicola. So it doesn't leak too much. So it's not falling down imminently. And we've been working on our plans for the future of it as a real sort of hub for the community and the new home for the museum. Now, when we started, this was our vision. And that was sort of inspired by our colleagues at the Dorset Museum, who had 11 million from the lottery for a 14 million pound project. Unfortunately, things changed slightly because that was in 2018, 2019, and this little thing called COVID came along, which did a number of things. One is it cost us 3 years because they closed down for a while because they were focused on supporting cultural organisations in deep financial trouble. And they also put in place a maximum grant of £5 million. Now, as we're doing two things in one, which is restoring a building that's falling down, basically, which would cost 5 or 6 million just on its own, and then we're converting it for use as a community hub and the new home of the museum, which again would cost about 6 million or so on its own. There's also been a small amount of cost inflation.
Oh.
We all know, thanks to our friend Mr. Putin, as well as our friend Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng. So that's really sort of put the cat among the pigeons. And also, we've been talking to people about our plans for the building, and we now have agreed plans for what's called REBA Stage 2. Now, just to go back slightly, we stuck an application into the National Lottery Heritage Fund, which we're delighted to say, was successful. We heard that news back in June, and we've been working hard since. And these are the plans we put in, and this was paring everything back to the bone. Really was cutting everything that wasn't absolutely 100% essential. And that included having a tent instead of a cafe between the two courtrooms, which was a really difficult decision to make. So that was then, but things have changed slightly. So one of the main things is that £5 million limit from the National Lottery has changed. I think it was 2 weeks after we got the result, wasn't it, Nicola?
No, it was 2 weeks after we submitted the bid.
Ah, right, that's right. They suddenly said the limit's not 5 anymore; it's now 10. And I think it's probably fair to say we may have some hope of having a little more than 5 million, as long as we are sensible and talk to people and so on and so forth. So that has given us a lot more flexibility than we might otherwise have dared hope for. And the lottery very clearly really want to support the project. We've got through the difficult bit, so they've now earmarked the rest for us. So the difficult bit is the bit we've already done. We're 95% certain to go ahead with the rest of the project for it actually to happen, as long as we can raise the extra cash. We still have to put in an application, but hopefully that will be fairly straightforward. Though we do have to write it, don't we, Nicola?
We do.
And keep us busy. So these are the plans we have, and what you'll see is that we have. I need to be able to annotate, and I should. Around on my screen a bit.
You can see a marker pen somewhere.
Yeah, I've lost it. Lost the marker pen. Text. Draw. Spotlight. There we go. Right, hopefully you can see my arrow. So the way this works is you come through the entrance, through under the columns into the entrance hall, and then we have a whole series of spaces around here. I'll go through in a bit more detail. But what you might see is that we now have a new extension on the side with a stair and lift in it. So what I'm going to call the stair tower. And then we have cafe filling in the gap between the two courts.
And no tent.
And no tent. So my next slide has that hopefully a little more bit closer in. And where's my mouse gone? There we go. So we've also moved the welcome desk from being in the centre to being at one side. That works much better in terms of the flow. So we have an entrance lobby here, loos on each side. You'll come and say hello to the person at the welcome desk, and then go through here into the start of the exhibition. Now, we're still working on this, but the working assumption is that this will be the story of Devizes, telling the story of the town. And then we have store and staff offices here. We go through circulation space. And then here will be a small gallery, which probably will have the Britain cabinet in. And the idea is that that will be a bridge between the story of Devizes, which will sort of pick up on the Victorian sort of importance of the town and why the assize court was built, and justice and injustice. And then we'll link through into here, which will be the background of the museum and the society. You'll then go through into the stair tower, go up the stairs, or use the lift to get to the first floor. In the meantime, leading off from the entrance hall, You can come through this door and there'll be loos, and through double doors into special exhibition gallery. So this will be up to what's called GIS standards, Government Indemnity Scheme standards. So it means we'll be able to continue to borrow objects from national collections. So we'll be able to mount exhibitions rather like the Revelia Swan into the future, which is, of course, going to be really important. Then between the two courts, you see we have the cafe with servery and loo and things, with doors leading out to the space at the back. Then separately, you'll have an entrance here into the lecture theatre and multi-use event space here, with a second lift that I'll come to when you see upstairs, and store for chairs and tables and things. And then at the front, this is a learning space with a store and separate loo. This will have its own entrance in under the portico, which also means this can be used out of hours when everything else, the rest of the building, is alarmed. So that's the basic layout of the ground floor. Is that anything you want to add, Nicola?
I think only that the temporary exhibition galleries design the space so that it's accessible separately from everything else as well. So it gives us a bit more flexibility with that space. So if we want to do special exhibitions that are separate to the rest of the museum, so you've got separate entry, or we want to use that as a takeover space for something, then it gives us that chance as well.
Thank you. Okay, so if we then go on to the next one, this is the upper floor. And you'll see, I'll go into that in a bit more detail now. So if you remember, I'd left you on the ground floor at the with the Britain cabinet, and then you come up the stair and the lift. We're thinking about how we can tell a story in this space, but possibly about the geology of the county and natural environment. And you come through here, and then the galleries up here. This will be our archaeology collection. So we've yet to work in detail how this will work. And at the back, we have some support spaces and plant rooms and things like that. Then there'll be a gallery above the cafe, the gallery here. So this will take us through to probably the end of the Saxon period, with a few treasures from the later period, from the medieval period. And we'll finish off by encouraging people to go out and explore and discover more about the county. So very much, you've seen it here, now go and explore the county. And from there, there's a lift so that people who can't manage the stairs then will be able to go to the ground floor. And here, a lift, fire-protected stairs down to the entrance hall. And it's, for us, having two lifts is very important, because what that means is that everybody will be following the same route through the building. At the moment, although we have a lift that connects all the main public floors, if you're using the lift rather than the stairs, then you sort of have to go backwards through part of the displays, and it really is very disconcerting. This will bring everything together. And then we have office space here. Now, the huge problem is that we still don't really have enough space. I'd love to have an extra floor where we could stick all the staff and offices out the way within some meeting rooms and things, but we just don't have that space. There isn't enough height in the two courtrooms to be able to get an extra floor in, because for all sorts of reasons. So we are pretty well stuck with this, which is not great, but really there's not a lot we can do at this stage. If we can, one day we might get a second phase, in which case we can move things around and sort of improve that and bring the spaces much more back to as they were when constructed. So work has continued on much more detail because these plans are now ready to go to Wiltshire Council for what's called a pre-application. This is part of the discussions with Wiltshire Council as the planning authority on whether what they like, what they don't like, whether they're minded to approve this when we put in for planning permission. and you'll see all sorts of things here, just to give you an idea of the level of detail.
Mm.
And here we've got issues about how the space connects to the road, to footpaths, and so on elsewhere on the site. And then we've had an initial set of drawings from landscape architect. So I think it's probably fair to say, Nicola, we're not convinced by all this, but
They're
it's
in
good
draft
enough.
form.
It's good enough for the pre-app.
Initial.
Yeah, we're not sure about the pebbles for one. But if we look at that in just a bit more detail. So at the front, we will have a ramp for the building, possibly one rather than two, but it's important to try and keep the building symmetrical. We'll have a coach drop-off point, and then the footpath will continue alongside in front of the building. So that's the front. The back is slightly more interesting. So the idea here is to have a nice open space here with this can be used for, this can be paved, can be used for all sorts of things, sort of performance space and so on. Wavy benches where children, anyone can sit having their lunch. Oh, I should say, of course, this will be spill out space for the cafe in fine weather. So tables and chairs and what are they called? Parasols and things, and small scale planting to divide the space off, and space here, a link here for the back to the brewery side. On the pebbles that you can see as at number 9, those are intended to be for children to play on. We're not convinced, but we'll change that in due course. And again, just to give you a level of the detail, these are the drains. You can't do something like this. We've been looking at the drains and how we get air handling plant and how the heating is going to be done. So the heating will be through a ground source heat pump. We'll have solar panels on the roof, and we will also we're just discussing with the Canal and River Trust to see if we can discharge rainwater from the roof, parts of the roofs, into the canal rather than into the sewers, which will have a major sort of environmental benefit. We've also had, our architects have also been looking in much more detail at the building. So this, believe it or not, with all the pigeon muck, is the above the roof, is the roof space above the main entrance hall. And the ceiling here really is in very poor condition, and it's a real problem. So what the only option is actually to take it down, put a new steel framework up, and recreate the plaster ceiling, along with recreating, sort of putting the plaster back in lots of other places as well. So these are the technical drawings. And this is the way that we need to control the air handling. So particularly the special exhibition gallery on the ground floor, that's the purple colour, we need to keep that very even temperature and humidity to ensure that we meet the government indemnity standards. And then, of course, many of you will know that on the Wadworth Brewery site, there's a planning application in. Now, what has happened is that a few years ago, when Wadworth said that they were going to be moving production, Wiltshire Council commissioned a study looking at how the Assize Court, the historic building, historic buildings of the brewery, and that new development could work together. And this is, if you like, a blueprint to tell us and the developer of the new housing what they want, what Wiltshire Council wanted to see happen. Now, that development has been being done by a company called Backhouse. They have an option on the site, and this was their initial plan, rather unhelpfully, with gardens, house gardens, backing onto the Assize Court, rather than it being the lively space that Wiltshire Council wished to see. That has been updated. So it's now we have houses facing on here, facing onto the back of the assize court, with a rather tortuous route through to the back of the building and to the canal and to what will be a towpath on this side, on the town side of the canal, rather than being the other side, which will encourage visitors to come into Devizes. So if you compare that with what the council's blueprint was, you'll see there's a bit of a gap there. So Backhouse have a planning application that's in at the moment that's due to be determined, that's the posh word, to be decided on in the middle of April. So we'll see what happens with that. Now, the obvious question is, how much is this going to cost? And to be honest, we're not quite sure. But these are the figures from the first round of getting costs together. And I think that 12.6 million is probably now about right. But then we'd have to put contingency and inflation on top of that. So we're probably looking at 13 or 14 million, something like that. But we're just working through how that all works at the moment, because there's some design choices to come, and we'll then need to see really what we could afford. The timeline is that we've got our development stage funding. We've got, well, I was going to say 2 years, but our development stage application will need to go in the summer of 2025. And if everything worked wonderfully, the building will be open in 2030. It would help if somebody had a sort of few million they could give us, but that's probably not the world we inhabit. So I think with that, unless there's anything you want to add, Nicola, then I hand over to you.
Okay, thank you. So as David said, we're now in what's called the development phase of the project. So this is a 2-year period where, as you can expect, we get to develop the project. So this is building up all of our plans. So as David's shown, all of the architectural plans, but also looking at gallery design and what's called activity planning as well. So looking at events and courses and activities we want to run throughout the project, and looking at longer term what we want the new museum to look like and run as we go forward as well. So where are we now? So we now have, as David alluded to, a project team in place. So it's not just the two of us doing everything anymore, which is quite nice. So we now have 2 colleagues joined us. So Helen, who is our project support officer, and Claire Slack, who is our project engagement officer. And I'm sure quite a lot of you will hear from Claire in the next year or so, because she's busy going out talking to everyone about the project and seeing how many people we can get involved. And alongside this, we've also got our professional team in place. So we have Purcell, the architects, as well as they have a professional team alongside them that do some of the structural engineer work, landscaping, whatnot. And then we have just appointed a couple of more consultants as well, which I'll talk about in a minute. So as David has gone through, the REBA 2 plans are almost complete. There is still some jiggling to be, and as things develop further, I'm sure they will change slightly. And as David also said, we've got some more work to do on developing the landscaping as well. So we're hoping the pre-application to which council will go in very soon. And we will then be developing those plans further, and depending on what feedback we get from the council on that. So alongside that, what we've been doing is looking at community engagement and really going out to talk to people about the project, to see what a local community want to see in the new building and what sort of place you want it to be. And at the same time, we're just about starting to look at what stories we want to tell and the gallery layout as well. Could I have the next slide, please, David? Thank you. So the first of our new professional team is a company called Image Makers, who joined us back in January. So Image Makers actually did a little bit of work for us back in 2020 when we were first looking at the project to do some outline schemes, but they're now fully on board after a full open tender process. And they're here as our interpretation and exhibition designers. So what that is working very closely with the staff team to develop themes and stories that we want to tell, identify which objects we want to share in the new museum, and then they will be taking the lead on what the new galleries will look like, case designs, layouts, lighting, all of that. And could I have the next slide, please? Image makers have they were only appointed in January, so they're really only just getting going, but this is one of their initial sketches they did in their bid, which really liked, was the idea of having some art installation in the atrium, and this plays on the Bushbury lozenge. And what image makers will be doing very much is not just working with the staff team, but they'll be working with our other consultants, so particularly the architects and the landscape architects, because what we want to make sure is the interpretation isn't just in the galleries, it runs throughout the whole building, and we're making sure that we continue to tell that story inside and outside, so people really get that full experience as they go round. Next slide, please. What we've been doing with image makers, so I don't expect you to read this, but this is just an idea of the sort of brain dumps we've been having at the moment. So our staff have been working to start looking at the sort of themes and stories that we want to have in the galleries, because it's very easy to look at what we've got in the current museum and just move it over, but we don't want to do that. We want to have a think and see where we can display different items and what people want to see. But we can't just, I mean, you can go out to 50 people and say, what do you want to see in a new museum? And you'll get 50 different answers of people wanting very different things. So what we've got to do to start with is to just have an idea of the sort of aspects that we could show, what objects we have, what could possibly work. And then what we want to do is then take out some initial suggestions to the wider community to get people's feedback. Can I have the next slide, please? So one of the first projects we're going to be running is something called an Ideas Station exhibition. So we have two students from Bath Spa University, Anita and Cynthia, with us at the moment, and they are working with staff to develop an exhibition that will both go out touring and will also end up actually at the museum as well. And this is taking some of our very initial themes ideas about potential gallery stories and turning them into something where we can display it to people. And I mean, this is just, it's a work in progress at the moment, but for example, it's looking at, would you rather this theme, or what really resonates with you out of this group? And the idea is to make it something really interactive. And what we want to do is to take it out to people in rural areas, so pubs, cafes, not just in Devizes, but further afield as well. And the idea is that, therefore, otherwise, if we just had it at the museum, we'd only really get people who would make the effort and want to come to the museum. So what we want to do is make sure we're going out to people who wouldn't necessarily engage with us at the moment. Next slide, please. So what have we been up to so far? So my colleague Claire has been very busy. So she has already identified around 62 potential community partners. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to engage with everyone, because that's an awful lot of people, but it shows sort of how busy Claire's been and the level of interest in the project as well. And 20 of those groups have already started working with us. We also now have an activity plan consultant on board as well. So Jane Davies is going to be working very closely with Claire to develop the activities and events we want to run. So these are just some of the groups of people that we've been working with, including Devizes Public Living Room, Wiltshire Youth Offending Team, Alzheimer's, SEN schools, the Food Bank, various care homes, the U3A, and quite a lot of schools and colleges. And Claire has also started a youth advisory group and a community advisory group. And this is some of the lovely pictures we have of Claire going out. I'm not sure if Cookie the dog was much help in consultation, but we'll try and encourage their views into it where we can. But we've been working with specific groups of young people and a specific group of community people to meet every couple of months. And what they've been doing is specifically looking at elements of the building and the interpretation and feeding back. And we will also be setting up an access advisory group to look specifically, not just at the building, but also how we make sure that the interpretation we develop is accessible to everyone as well. Right. Next slide, please. Brilliant. And this is another project that I think is really cool that we've just started working on, which is a 3D model project. Don't ask me any technical questions about it because it goes straight over my head. It looks quite cool. So we have a student called Remy, who is from Bath College, who's been with us over the last 3 or 4 months. And what he has been doing is modeling the Assizes court and what it will look like into some 3D software. And the idea will be that people will be able to look at it online. And if I can have the next slide, David, and we'll see if the video works. And the idea is that additionally, we'll be able to turn this into virtual reality. So this is very much in draft form at the moment, is that people will be able to either look on their phones or come into the museum and have a headset, and you'll be able to walk around and see what the Assizes court will look like. So this is a really exciting project. Again, I'm taking technical advice from our student because he knows far more than I do, but we're hoping to have that ready in the summer. And I find it's a really good way to interest some of the younger people in getting involved in the project as well. So we're going to be quite busy over the next 6 months or so. So we're starting to do a few more advisor groups at the moment and really start to roll out this ideas station exhibition. So you'll start looking out for that in May, June to pop up in places. And then it'll come back to the museum in September. Something else that we're going to roll out in May, June is a members survey, and we would really appreciate it and would really value everyone's opinions on that. And following from that, we will also be doing some focus groups and more targeted consultation with members, with volunteers to really, what we want to do with this project is to get new audiences involved, but we also want to make sure that we're developing a museum where our supporters and our core audiences still feel at home and feel like we take what we love about the museum where we are and just move it across to make it bigger and better in the new building as well. And then you'll see, particularly if you're local to Devizes or in the Wiltshire area, we'll be running a lot of projects out and about in the area in the summertime. And then, unfortunately, as the year comes to an end, Claire's going to have to come back to the office a little bit more because, as David alluded to, we have to start preparing the next application. And Claire's got the joy of writing what's called an activity plan, which is part of the delivery phase application and is one of 21 supporting documents around, I think I counted today, that we've got to do. And the activity plan alone is probably about 150 pages. But what it does, it's what we're doing at the moment is trialing a lot of activities, events, and projects that we think could run not only as we go through the next phase of the project, but things that we can continue to run when we open the new building. And what we want to do is make sure we're building up I mean, many of you will see how many amazing events we currently run, but we want to make sure we're doing even more and engaging a wider range of people. So that's just one of the documents, but I think in total, the last application was around 700, 800 pages. We never did a tally in the end, did we? But we suggest this one is going to be slightly more. I'm guessing around 900 pages of text we'll have to produce, including an application form with at least 40 questions in it. So as David says, we've got till summer 2025 to submit this. So we've got a little bit of time to work on that. And then The Heritage Fund will assess that, and then we will hear the result in late autumn 2025. Then, all being well, building work would start in 2026. Emphasis on all being well, I think there, isn't it, David? And yeah, with everything, if everything goes fully to plan, then we would plan to open the museum sometime in late 2030. This is a goal. It's not a set date at this point. So I wouldn't put it in your diary.
Because we've not done a proper timeline working with the architects and sort of looking at building contractual times and things like that. So it's a target at the moment.
It's a target. But yes, so you would see scaffolding and work actually start to happen in the building in likely late 2026 onwards. So it seems a long time away, but actually, I mean, we found out we got the money nearly a year ago now. Time will go very quickly, and you'll see we have an awful lot to do in such time.
And not least of which is raise the extra money.
Yes.
So just to highlight that in this, at the moment, the key focus for that is trusts and foundations. For many of those, they need planning permission. So we're hoping to submit planning application in something like June or July this year, which means that we'll have that so we can do those applications to trusts and foundations. And also we've been talking to one or two high net worth individuals who may be able to, we might be able to persuade to support the project. And then there's a sort of variety of other potential funding sources as well. So we're not going to be running a public fundraising campaign because until we hear back from the lottery in autumn 2025, we can't guarantee that the project will actually happen. So if we take people's pound coins and £5 notes, and the project doesn't happen, then we can't give them back easily. So we will then, at that point, then run a major fundraising campaign. In the meantime, you as members are already supporting the project because the museum, the Wiltshire Archaeological and Natural History Society, is already investing around £30,000 a year in the project. So you are already directly supporting the project. And we're encouraging people who are not yet members to join. Again, that will really help. And also, if you are a member, perhaps you may consider becoming a donor member and contributing a little more with your subscription. And inevitably, of course, as well, that will bring in more gift aid as well. So that will really help. So I think that's us done for the moment, unless there's anything else you want to say, Nicola. We've got just a couple of quickies before we throw the floor open for questions.
I don't. I think that really the bottom line is this new building it gives us a little bit more gallery space, but what it really gives us is that community and multi-use event space that we just don't have at the current building, and we will never be able to have. So it will just mean that we can develop and deliver so many more activities for the town, but it will also really help in terms of business sustainability and commercial use as well. So it's just it's a really exciting project, and we hope you'll come along for the ride.
Yeah, and it's an iconic building which really will put the museum on the map. So just a couple of things before we hand over to you. Get there. So, and opening in a couple of weeks. Amazing, isn't it? Wiltshire Thatcher photographing the photo album, which includes the amazing image of the Wiltshire Thatcher that was on the front cover of Led Zeppelin 4 album. That's the one with Stairway to Heaven on it. So that's amazing, and it's some really interesting stuff. Lisa has sworn us to secrecy, so we can't show any more than that. But I think you'll enjoy it I know you will enjoy it when it's open. So that's one thing. And the other is that there's a program with Dan Snow, History Hit, on Easter Sunday I think it's 9 o'clock to 10:25. I'm not quite sure of the timings.
I think it's
Channel
8
5,
till 9:20.
Stonehenge, the discovery of the Dan Snow. Yeah, and they're talking, and it includes footage shot at the museum. So we're very much in that as well. So sort of underlining the importance of our collections. So I think with that, we're done. Very happy to try and answer any questions. I'll just stop sharing now. See, there's one question ready there. On. There we go. So we're back with you, and where are we? And I just need to open up the Q&A. Oh, Peter has said that the church at Wilton is open most hours. Not that I've been there. I must go more often. So yeah, I'll find out about that. And so the first question from Malcolm was, will there be space for the library? Unfortunately, at this stage, the answer is no. What we'll be doing is we'll be keeping the existing buildings as a collections discovery centre, and so that will house the library and all the collections of the museum. We have 1.4 kilometres of shelving, believe it or not, and that just will not fit into the building. The initial plan was to have a basement for storage and a first floor library and archive and big extension out the back. To do that would cost about 25 million. So that's just completely unrealistic. So what we'll do is, if you think of the current building as being three basic blocks, which is the Georgian townhouse with the library and archive and the Roman gallery on the ground floor, number one. Number two, the prehistory gallery on the ground floor, lecture room and Oxman and Piper galleries as the second block. And then the third block is the other Georgian townhouse. We'll keep ideally two of those blocks. That's the art gallery and the Georgian townhouse on the right-hand side. We'll keep that as the discovery centre, and then that will release the other block, the current library and Roman gallery, to be sold to raise some cash to then convert the rest of it and to sort of provide for future sustainability. Oh, and I think I've just answered Mike Harris's question as well. So either half or 2/3 we keep as collections discovery centre. And Jonathan has said, what will happen in the basement? Would you like to do that one, Nicola? Will I rest my voice?
Yes, I can tell you're a bit croaky. So we're making the basement good at this phase. So there will be stair access down to where the cells were in the court building, but we can't afford to do the lift access down there at the moment, so it wouldn't be accessible to everyone. So we can't have it really on the visitor route. So it would be open for tour groups. Potentially, or special visits. But what we're planning to do is a smaller second phase of the project where we create interpretation in the cells, which I think could be really fun and a great way to tell this further tell the story of the Assize Court building. So we'll be able to put level access in down there, and we're also planning to put a changing places toilet into the building as well. So a smaller second phase, but at the moment we'll make the basement good, and yeah, special groups could visit down there. Did I forget anything there, David?
No, that's good.
I think unfortunately you might have to answer the next one, which is Brian's question.
Oh yeah, which is from Brian. Yeah, what historically surrounded the court building? How could this be reflected in the plans? I'm not sure. I'm not sure quite what you mean by surrounded, so I'll include front and back. The front at some stage did have railings, but we can't put those back. That would really get in the way of all sorts of things. So we'll have some sort of planting out the front. Out the back, it was always, apart from the ground floor building, that was the judge's office. The judge's office and rooms for the lawyers. So that's going to be the cafe. Beyond that, it was a higgledy-piggledy series of industrial buildings on the wharf. So it really doesn't make much sense to try and reflect that in the plans. But I think the one thing that has been picked up in the landscaping is the idea of brick walls, which sort of reflect some of that industrial use.
And Anonymous asks, how much more display space will you have compared to the current museum? The answer to that is we haven't worked out exactly at that point. It will be a little bit more, but not a huge amount more display space. But what we will have is, as you've seen the plans, they're almost sort of square boxes, but gives us a much more flexible space to create partition walls or how we display, because where we are at the moment in the current museum, it's lots of little rooms and little tunnels that you go places, and it's not a very efficient use of the space we have. So the answer is not a huge amount much more, but the space we have is a lot more usable and we can really make the most out of it. And I think also with more modern display techniques as well, we can be a little bit more clever with how we display things. Sorry,
and doubling the space, doubling the display space wouldn't necessarily double the amount of time visitors wanted to spend, or double the number of visitors in the first place. So it's a question of being more sort of using it better.
Yeah. And
just to highlight, in case anyone asks, very definitely the Piper window will be coming with us. We're not sure where it'll go yet, but that will be at the heart of centerpiece of the displays.
Yeah. We're not sure about Horatio the Lion yet, are we? That'll be quite.
We've got to have Horatio somewhere, haven't we?
That would be quite a sight, trying to take him down the road. Interesting. Right.
Any other questions? No. Okay. Well, in that case, I think we'll leave it there. As Nicola said, you'll be hearing more from us, and there'll be sort of much more time to tell us what you think, particularly with the Ideas Station exhibition. So do look out for that. So thank you all very much for coming. I hope you found that interesting. We'll be posting this online and telling people in Devizes what we're up to, and we keep our fingers crossed that the pre-application procedure goes well and we can get planning permission, and more importantly, raise the cash. No stress there.
We're certainly going to be busy over the next 6 years.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.